Hello, my name is Chris Vescovi. Today I'm going to take you through how to use Turnitin Feedback Studio within the D2L Brightspace LMS environment. First, we're going to start off with a look at the Feedback Studio itself to get an idea of what tools Turnitin gives you for checking into student similarity on their papers, as well as efficiently leaving comments throughout the student's work. After that, we will take a look at the workflow for creating these Turnitin type assignments in D2L. We're also going to take a look at how you go about grading Turnitin assignments in D2L. Finally, we'll just come back to this slide and I'll explain Turnitin's tech support email as seen here. All right. So here is my Turnitin Feedback Studio screen. What we're going to do is take a look at the tools available to you here first, because it is important to know what you have available to you on this screen prior to doing all the settings and the setup over on the D2L side of things. So we will get here to the workflow, but for now, let's take a look at the tools we have available to us once all is said and done and a student paper has been submitted through a D2L Turnitin assignment type. This is the Feedback Studio screen. Here we can see a paper that has been submitted by a student. The paper was typed up in a word processor and then submitted to the D2L Turnitin assignment type. So the student never types their paper directly into this screen. That's important to note for teachers too. You will not be able to change the text of your student's paper on this screen. It is just used for showing and hiding certain information on top of a read-only submission. So my student has submitted their paper, and now I get 3 toolbars or layers worth of information. The blue layer is for leaving teacher feedback on the paper. The red layer is for similarity detection, and the purple layer is a grammar and spelling check. I'm going to turn off our blue and purple layers to begin with, and we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive into the red layer here. When a student's paper is submitted to a Turnitin assignment, the paper is compared to a massive database of documents on Turnitin's servers. So that database consists of current and archived internet websites, over 70 billion of them in fact. Along with that, there are over 1 billion student submissions in the database. All of that gets checked, and what's called a similarity score is generated for the specific paper. For this paper, my similarity score is a 13. I may click that 13 for some more detail in the match overview panel over here. That 13 is telling me 13% of my students' work on this paper matches sources found in that database. Those sources could be from the internet, from students outside of my school, as well as my own students. So as long as you configure your assignment properly, you are checking your student's own work against itself. So one class's papers, for example, will be run against each other as they are submitted. That also goes for your colleagues' submissions as well. So if you are assigning an assignment similar to what your colleague is assigning, you are both using Turnitin for that assignment, all of those students' papers will be checked up against each other. It also goes for your students' papers from year to year. So you don't have to worry about receiving shared papers that you already graded the previous year if you're using Turnitin both times. In my match overview on the right here, I can see my largest match for this paper is coming from Wikipedia. It's making up 7% of the student's work. No matter where you are on the paper, you may double click any of these sources, and the paper will adjust to call out that source to you. So this is calling my attention directly to this paragraph. On the pop-out box there, I also have a side-by-side view button here. This side-by-side view allows me to see not only the copied portion in my student's paper, but also how it appears in the source material. So on the right side, I see the red paragraph that was copied from Wikipedia into my student's paper, along with the remainder of that Wikipedia article. If I click the blue link here, that would open up Wikipedia in a new browser tab for me to see how the article appears on the current version of the website. This search box here that is comparing the sources that were found to your student's work, it will appear differently when you're looking at a student paper. If you are looking at a student's source paper that matches your current student's paper from your school, you will see the preview here. However, you will not see a full source text preview when you were looking at a student paper match from another school. In my example here, you can see my panel is blank. This student over at the University of Arkansas here, they submitted a paper that came up similar to what my student has. Now, in this example case, this is a negligible match. I'm probably not going to be concerned with it, but just for the sake of demonstration, I did want to show that I do not see that student's source work here because that student belongs to a different school and it's to protect their privacy. That will go both ways, so you never have to worry about your student's work being revealed to users outside of your school. Now, earlier I mentioned for a Wikipedia match, we would have clicked that blue link to see a Wikipedia page of how it currently stands on the internet. For a student paper match, where the student does not belong to your school, that blue link leads to this screen instead. This is a paper view request screen. This allows you to request a copy of that student's paper from the instructor who originally hosted the assignment. So this is for a student who is outside of my school. I'm requesting to view a copy of their paper because it came up as similar to my students. Just keep in mind, this is at the discretion of that instructor. You may not hear back from them. Now, when it comes to what to look for, when is this number going to be suspicious? It comes down to many factors, most notably, though, the nature of the assignment. If this is a creative writing piece off the top of the student's head, we want to see a 0% or very low percentages in the single digits. If this is a research paper or a literary analysis, the nature of the paper requires the student to use unoriginal work. So they're putting quotes and sources throughout their paper, citations. The more we ask for, or the more that we request in the guidelines for that paper, the higher this normal number will be for that assignment. So we might see something between a 15 to 30% for a research paper where we've asked for proof and evidence throughout the paper. That being said, you will get an idea of what's normal once you've logged into D2L and you've taken a look at the at a glance page to show you how your assignments stack up across the assignment submission pool. So we'll see tags like this, and you'll get an idea very quickly of what's normal for that assignment that you've assigned. And then you would take a look at the anomalies from there. So anything that is very, very high, definitely check out. It could be a case of plagiarism. Now, besides this match overview screen here, we also have what's called the all sources view here. I just want to point out the difference. The match overview shows you the largest instances of the matches across the student's paper and the database. The all sources view will show you every instance of every match across the database. For example, many websites will publish Wikipedia's content to their own website. And on this list, Turnitin is reporting every single instance of that match across all of those websites for your student's paper. For example, Wikipedia, again, that match was this full red paragraph here. On eNotes.com, a very similar paragraph is published. It looks like only these two words are different. We have it on the all sources list, but when it comes to the largest match for our student's paper, Wikipedia matches more closely, which is why it took the top slot for this match on our match overview screen here. The all sources view also allows you to exclude sources one by one. So you can actually remove sources from your report manually if you'd like. Anything you remove can be restored from this button here. The final button on our red toolbar is this filters and settings area. This allows us to make blanket exclusions as opposed to single source exclusions. So from here, we can hide quotes. So anything within quotation marks can be removed from the page, from the report. so they would no longer contribute to the score. We may remove a bibliography. So if the student has a list of citations at the bottom of the paper, the list itself will be removed from contributing to this report, because of course, if very popularly cited sources are on that list, they will appear similar across database papers. So just to be clear, that is not the citations throughout the paper, it is just the text of the bibliography itself. And hiding that will exclude a good portion of this match for certain paper types. After that, we can make exclusions manually based on a word count or a percentage. So for example, if I plugged in a percentage of 2% there as a threshold, we would not see anything underneath 2% showing up on our list or contributing to our overall score. And that's just a nice way to get rid of any clutter. So before I mentioned my 1% here were negligible matches. If I wanted to, I could hide them by plugging in a threshold there. These exclusions are configurable at the assignment level when we get to D2L and the assignment creation process. I will show you how to do it out there, but you may always toggle them on and off once you are inside the student's paper. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close our red layer now and take a look at the blue one. The blue layer is for creating teacher feedback on the student's paper. You may click anywhere on a student's paper to see this tiny black toolbar for inserting a comment. There are 3 types. The T icon gives you an inline text comment, just like this one. That's nice for putting in between the lines of the paper, or maybe leaving in the margins of the paper, right on the surface level. The bubble comment type is a text box. So that will look like this one, where we can type whatever we need to for the student in this box. The third icon gives you access to a quick mark library. Quick marks are system created comments that are already configured for you. You can see here, when I click it, it defaults to my commonly used list, but there are plenty of lists available to you that are built in. The gear here will allow us to manage these sets so we can mix and match tags onto a custom list. We may show and hide any of these lists from our quick view here. So if we don't want to see middle school, for example, we would go into there and hide them from ourselves. We can also take our regular bubble comments and convert them to quick marks to save them on the fly into a quick mark list. So you may customize a list of quick marks to choose from. The point is to cut down on your amount of typing. You can also access quick marks from the quick mark panel over here. And in this case, instead of clicking out on the paper, you would drag and drop these into the assignment. We can see a citation needed quick mark right here. Quick marks have these built-in explanations of what they are and a little help for the student during review. So I did not have to type this explanation of what citing a source means. I just inserted the quick mark and the student gets that comment. If I wanted to, though, I can add additional comments down here. The quick marks also tie into Turnitin's rubric system. If you decide to use a Turnitin rubric, it will appear in this compact view over here. And I will show you how to build a rubric custom when we get to the D2L assignment setup. But for now, let's just take a look at an existing rubric that is part of this paper assignment. The rubric is displaying in a compact view over here. If I wanted to see the full traditional grid view, I can click this expander button here. I'm going to stick with the compact view though. You may grade directly off of this compact view here. If you click apply to grade, the grade is calculated based on your rubric settings and sent into this box up here. Click that, we get a 52. You can always come into that box and overwrite the score though. Now I mentioned we can tie comments directly to rubrics. We do that by leaving a comment out in the paper and then clicking on the little rubric icon that shows up in its pop-out box. So when we do that, we can tie each individual quick mark or bubble comment to a specific rubric criteria. So here we can see I've attached citation needed to conventions, If I scroll down on my rubric to see conventions, I can see that little shortcut to the comment I left. So as the teacher, I am logging evidence to make an accurate call on what the student will receive for this category grade here on the rubric. For the students, when they come in to review their paper, they will see the comments attached to each category, and they'll know exactly what influenced your scoring. They'll also know exactly what to fix in order to improve the specific rubric criteria. Finally, there is a feedback summary button here that allows you to leave comments for the paper overall. This is where we can leave an up to 3-minute long voice comment and or an extended text box comment here. Comments and quick marks may also be added to text by highlighting the text and associating it directly to it. And that's what I've done here. You can see this comment is directly attached to this highlight. We can change the color of that highlight. We can also highlight to strike through text, to put a red line through it. The final Feedback Studio tool is this purple toolbar down here. This is the ETS E-Rater. ETS is the educational testing service, and they've put together a handbook that ties into this automatic spelling and grammar tool. The paper is checked for spelling and grammar errors, and if anything is found, the student may click on the highlighted portion of that error and read this handbook, this ETS handbook, about whatever the error is. So here I have a passive voice problem, and when I click that and view this handbook as the student, I can see an article about whatever that issue is. So this was a passive voice problem. It's telling me what the passive voice is, when the proper time to use it in my work is, and I'm given examples throughout the article. For this assignment, I had high school set as the default level of this handbook, but the student may click around to whatever level they'd like to see. So I'm going to switch to advanced, and we'll see that the article changed just a little bit with updated language. The spelling and grammar check may be configured to show and hide different portions of markup, and I will show you the options when we get over to the D2L workflow. You may or may not decide to use that tool. It does come in handy if you're allowing students to revise their work on their own. So they'd be able to check that purple report, fix the grammar issues, and then resubmit. And I'll explain how you would do that once we get into the D2L assignment setup. The final button I'd like to point out here before we leave the Feedback Studio and go over to the D2L Brightspace dashboard is this download button. When you click download, you have an option called the Current View Report. The current refers to which of these toolbars is currently active. Whatever is active will print out onto a PDF file. So I click the Current View Report to generate a printable PDF file. Both students and teachers can do this. So the student is not dependent on the teacher to be able to generate a report. I've already generated a Current View Report for all 3 of my layers here. Let's take a look at it. We get the student's paper, all of the markup from the teacher, so the blue comments there. We get the purple grammar and spelling comments, and we get the red similarity index on here too. So we see the matches that came up in the similarity search. Now, obviously, we can't click on these little boxes to see any details about the markup. So what we're going to do instead is scroll underneath the paper to see a breakdown of that detail. Here's our similarity index broken down for us. And here is a page-by-page list of every comment as it appears above. And this is in the order that those comments appear. And then finally, at the bottom of the paper, we have a full copy of the rubric. It shows the student's current standing and the remainder of that rubric, the other levels as well. This report is great for teachers when a serious plagiarism concern arises. You may print this out and share the report with administration if need be. For students, this is helpful for generating printable copies to work with offline. So students can print this report and work with a tutor, maybe in a writing center or something, or they may use it just to work offline with pen and paper. Okay, I'm going to close that report now. And finally, we're going to head over to the D2L Brightspace side of setting up a Turnitin assignment. All right, so I am logged into a sandbox D2L course here. It's very bare bones. It may look a bit different from what you're used to because it is a generic sandbox. This has not been customized for any certain school or environment. To build an assignment, what you'll do is click this assignments tab. But keep in mind, this assignments tab may be called something else in your environment. It could be a folders tab or a assessments tab, or maybe it's your content tab. It's been relabeled as your content tab, or Dropbox. Dropbox is another common term for this assignments tab. But within your D2L class, you will go to that tab wherever you normally create assignments, whether it's content, whether it's assignments, whether it's Dropbox. You're going to go to that page, and you're going to build a new folder to set up an assignment, just like you normally would for a D2L assignment. So I'm going to click New Folder, and we'll get started. When you create the new folder assignment, it will need a title. So I will put in a title there. We'll type in instructions if we'd like the student to see instructions with this. I'm going to leave mine set to individual. I'm going to limit my submission type to file submission, which means I'm asking for some type of document that's been typed elsewhere. I want the student to upload it for me. Under that, I'm going to say, I just want one file per student, or one per submission. If I do allow the student to resubmit, I choose here whether I want to allow submissions that are, do I want to keep all the submissions? Do I want to keep only the most recent submission? Or am I just locking the student into one single submission? I'm going to go with all submissions are kept. That way, every time a student resubmits, if I'm allowing resubmissions for this assignment, I will have every copy of what was resubmitted. And that's a nice way to track what changes your students have made since the first report was generated. So they take a look at this red report and this purple report. Maybe they fix some citations, fix some grammar issues throughout their paper, and they resubmit their paper. This will allow me to see every version of that paper that was kept. If I want to be notified every time a student submission is submitted, I can plug in my email here. If I have a grading category, I can designate that here. I'll grade my assignment out of 100 points. I don't have a grade item for this specific D2L assignment, but if I wanted to, I could create one. For this rubric section, this is a little tricky. This is where you would add a D2L rubric. This create rubric in new window allows you to build D2L rubrics. But because Turnitin is a separate product, it's a different company, it's a different product that we're pulling in for use to the D2L LMS, I don't necessarily always want to use a D2L rubric because a D2L rubric alone is not going to work with this Turnitin rubric screen here. So if I want to use the rubric screen here to grade on the fly and to tie comments to, I'm actually not going to use the D2L style rubric. I'm going to leave that blank. I won't add anything here. We will have an opportunity to add a Turnitin rubric later on. Now, if you don't want to use the Turnitin rubric system here, and you prefer to use the D2L rubrics, then you would attach a rubric here, and we would ignore the Turnitin rubric area later on. I'm going to leave the scoring rubric, e-portfolio, and anonymous marking set to their default. I don't necessarily need to change those for a Turnitin assignment. And then I'm going to click Save here. Now, I'm getting into the habit of clicking Save when I'm done with each of these tabs here, because it will come in, it's going to be very important when we get to this Turnitin tab, and I'll explain why. So I'm going to go ahead, and when I'm done with my property screen, I'll click save. And then what I would do is move on to the next tab, restrictions. Restrictions and objectives, though, don't necessarily mean anything specific for the Turnitin function of this assignment. Those are going to be your typical D2L setup tabs. I'm going to skip over them, but remember, as you're configuring, please get into the habit of clicking save before you move on to the next tab. And I'll explain why when we hit the Turnitin tab over here. So you can see by default, all of these Turnitin options are waiting to be enabled. I'm going to go ahead and enable grade mark, which turns on the blue layer of my Turnitin screen. It also, when checked off, should enable your originality check as well. When I turn on grade mark, I've got this automatically sync grades option. I'll leave it set to that. It means that when this score is populated into this box, and if it's ever updated in here, it will carry back over into the D2L side of the gradebook. So we do want that automatically updated. So grade mark is active. I'm automatically syncing. And then I've got originality check activated down here. Originality check is the red layer of the feedback studio. So we want that active to see any plagiarism or similarity that's occurring in our students' papers. So I'm going to have that checked off. And then I decide, do I want to allow my students to see the Turnitin similarity score? Do we want the students to see this red layer? I'm going to go with yes. Turnitin recommends you go with yes. We do want students seeing this tool and understanding what it's checking for. We want students using it to their benefit to double check that all of their work has been cited properly. For frequency, we're going to leave that set to automatic originality checking on all submissions. We don't want to have to manually identify certain submissions for checking. Now, this is the tricky part about the save button. It has to do with this more options and Turnitin button. This more options and Turnitin button is going to allow us to further configure Turnitin. However, the options that we see in there are dependent on grade mark and originality check being activated. Now, the problem at this point is if I were to click this button, those child options would not display properly because the more options menu does not know that these have been turned on yet. We have to click save on this D2L setup page here for the check marks that we just checked off to be recognized by the more options menu that appears. I'm going to go ahead and click more options and turn it in now. So here's our menu that appears. This is our more options menu. And on this screen, under optional settings, we see a bunch of options that affect the layers out in the feedback studio. The problem is, if we hadn't clicked save on that previous screen, these options would not have recognized the check marks that we've done previously. So we do need to click save on every step of that D2L assignment just to confirm that this screen knows what's already been set before we do any further configuration. Now let's take a look at these options here. The title and the grade are locked in from when we set that on the D2L side. Under that, we have submission setting. The first option here is, are we storing student papers? The answer is going to be yes. We do want to store student papers in the standard paper repository if we want to check those papers against each other. So for example, student A's paper needs to be in this repository in order to check student B's paper against it. For allow submission of any file type, I'm going to leave that off. The reason being, Turnitin by default will accept Word documents, PDFs, Google Docs, and slideshows and spreadsheets from across programs by default. The only reason we would turn on this allow submission of any file type is if we are purposely asking for some type of imagery, so artwork or photography, that we want to leave blue comments on. artwork and photography cannot be checked for similarity. So if the point of this assignment is to check for that similarity, there is no need to allow any submission type. For allow late submissions, we'll see this one is locked in. D2L does allow late submissions. If the student submits after the fact, no worries, it will be marked as having been submitted after the due date, and you may dock points off for that as needed. For enable grammar checking using ETS E-Rater, that refers to that purple layer. Do we want the handbook activated for students? Do we want the grammar and spell check activated? If yes, then what level of the handbook do students see by default? I'm going to go with advanced, but remember the student can change this on their own. So for example, if they need the English learners version of that article, they may click into that on their own. For the categories enabled for the spelling and grammar check, keep in mind a couple situations. First of all, if this is a foreign language paper, the ETS grammar check will not work. It only works for English papers. You might want to turn the whole thing off if you're dealing with a foreign language paper, or you're just not concerned with grammar and spelling for this assignment. But if you do have it on, you can break down what gets scanned through these 5 categories. So we've got spelling, grammar, usage, mechanics, and style. If this is a creative writing piece that ignores conventions that the scanner is looking for, we do want to turn off certain categories so the whole assignment doesn't flare up in purple for no reason. For example, poetry would do that. Poetry would come up as a bunch of errors, even though it is intentionally breaking those rules. So for poetry, we might turn off everything but the spell check. Next, we have the opportunity to attach a rubric. This is the area to attach a Turnitin rubric. So if you'd like to use the Turnitin rubric system, you would configure and attach your rubric here. Once it's built, you can browse a long list of built-in rubrics here. Anything that you've used in the past or customized for yourself will be in that dropdown, and that is how you would select it. But to actually build those rubrics, what you're going to do is use this Launch Rubric Manager button. That pulls up a screen that looks like this. This is the Rubric Manager. And from here, we may browse any of the built-in rubrics. We may create a new rubric, which comes up like this, and save this once it's configured so that I can use it across any of my D2L courses and turn it in assignments. Now, unfortunately, there is no quick way to automatically convert a rubric that has been built elsewhere. So if you already have a D2L rubric or you have one in a Word document somewhere, you will have to do some copying and pasting to rebuild the rubric for Turnitin use. The reason why is because that Turnitin panel over in the Feedback Studio is dependent on a very strict assignment type or rubric type. It's tied to this format. So we do need to do some rebuilding here. Once it's rebuilt though, it might look like this, or no, I'm sorry. It might look like, let's see, let's go with a normal rubric here. And from this screen, you can see that I can edit descriptions, I can edit titles, I can edit point values. If I lock this one in, if I save it and I want to make another copy of it, what I can do is click duplicate this rubric and then work off the duplicate and change everything, make a new version. I can also change the scoring. So right now this is set to a traditional percentage-based rubric, but if I wanted to, I can click on the second button here for a raw point system where I'm assigning specific point values to every box. And after that, we have a qualitative rubric, which allows us to remove those scores and just look at the proficiency levels along the top here. Now, once a rubric is ready to go, you can save it and insert it into your assignment. You may also export a computer file. It is uneditable offline, but you can export this computer file and share it to colleagues who may then import it into their Turnitin assignment for use. So if you prepare a rubric, you may share that to someone for them to plug into their own assignment without them having to rebuild the whole identical rubric on their own. All right, I'm going to close this screen now. And we'll go back to our assignment settings. If you are not using a Turnitin rubric and you're sticking with the D2L rubrics instead, you will click that box and unselect it to detach the Turnitin rubric. Under that, we have compare against. Here we're going to make sure all three of these are checked so that my student's work gets checked against every side of the database. Under that, we have the similarity report generation option. So first of all, when does this similarity report get generated? Well, we can go with immediately or on the due date. Usually you're going to go with immediately. Now, here's the difference between the two immediately options. Now, we've already told D2L that, let's say we want to allow the students to be able to resubmit. This option here will lock the student into a report. So the student submits a paper, and even if we allow them to resubmit through D2L, the second report that they submit will be its own copy. Its own similarity report will be generated for it. And then we can see the different versions in D2L. The second option, where it says generate report immediately, but students can resubmit until due date. What this one is going to do, and D2L is a little different than other uses. That's why the language doesn't really match up here with what happens in D2L. But the second option here means that if a student were to submit a paper, they'd be able to overwrite that paper. So as long as it's coming in before the due date, they may overwrite a paper so that you would actually no longer have access to the original copy of that paper that came through. It's like a self-revision before the due date. It allows the student to overwrite their work as opposed to submitting different copies, different versions of it. Under that, we see allow students to view similarity reports, regardless of when they get generated. Allow students to view similarity reports, allows them to see those red reports. This mark is locked in for me because I already set this setting on the D2L setup. Under that, we have our three exclusions. So earlier I showed you how you can exclude certain work from the similarity detection, from the report. We can exclude the bibliography here, the quotes, or the small sources on the assignment default level. So here is how we configure the assignment as a whole, but just remember you can configure these further on a per paper basis once you are looking at those student papers. Under additional settings, it just says save these settings for future use. If I check that off, all these other checkboxes will be remembered so that the next time I create an assignment in this D2L class, the checkboxes will auto-populate. I will not have to configure them from scratch. All right, I'm going to click submit now. And that returns us to our edit folder screen here. So now all of these settings are active here and my more options are complete. I may now click save and close to complete the Turnitin D2L assignment setup. And we can see that sample 2 assignment is now appearing on my list of folders here for my assignments. At this point, a student would log in to their side of the D2L Brightspace course, and they would click on the assignments tab for that class, and they'd click the assignment that they wanted to submit a paper to. I'm on the instructor side, but let's say I'm the student and I click into that assignment. I would have an upload paper option here. So there'd be a button down here that allows the student to provide a submission to the instructor. Once that submission comes through, it will be available for the teacher within that same spot. So they click the assignment again, and we will see the submissions here that the students have uploaded. We may click on the similarity report score here next to the submission to launch the Feedback Studio window. If I grade from here, whether it's off of the rubric or I just plug in a grade in that box, the grade feeds back over to this screen here. However, it is only when I click, as the instructor, it is only when I click Publish Feedback that the grade and whatever blue comments that I've left on the student's paper It's only when I click publish feedback that that blue information and the grade are released to students and carried over into the D2L gradebook. Okay, so when I click publish feedback, this grade will carry over into the gradebook. Now, a note about that. When you are looking at grades within the D2L gradebook here, the grade that is in this box, it supersedes the grade that is out here. So you can see in this box here, I have an 80. And that's because at some point in the sandbox, I manually changed this grade to an 80 within the grade box here. If you manually change grades, let's say you add extra credit or you add a curve across all of the assignments directly from this D2L gradebook, the grades will not carry back over to this screen over here. So if a student is reviewing a report after you've curved an assignment, they are still going to see the old grade here unless you went through and changed these for yourself out here. And that's because this grade box is a one-way street due to privacy limitations. Turnitin has permission to write a grade into the D2L gradebook, but Turnitin never has permission to read grades out of the D2L gradebook. So again, if you do use this box to grade, once you publish feedback, that grade will carry over into this box. But if you change the grade in this box, that grade will not speak back to the Turnitin screen here. Now, to get around that, say you want to curve these over here so the grade stays accurate in both places for students, you may regrade in this box out here. You can cycle through your students either by using this drop down or hitting next or previous. You can update all the grades on this screen here, return to your assignment folder. I'll go back into that assignment and then publish the feedback again. And the new scores would then carry over into the gradebook. I should also mention that you may edit your assignment settings by editing your folder at any time from this screen. And you can also refresh reports manually from here if you need to. That's the similarity report that you would be refreshing. All right, so that is how you use Turnitin Feedback Studio in D2L Brightspace assignments. I'm just going to pull up my agenda again and show you the support email here. If you ever run into trouble with the way Turnitin is behaving in D2L Brightspace, if something, an option or a feature or some content should be appearing, you're used to seeing it there, but it's not, there could be an issue. It could be a technical issue that you want to bring to the attention of Turnitin support team and get some help on troubleshooting. If you'd like to do that, go ahead and email tiisupport@turnitin.com and someone from the Turnitin help desk will get back to you. When you're describing the issue, please reference the D2L Brightspace environment. It is important for our help desk to know how you are using Turnitin in order to help you. All right, thank you for joining me for this overview of how to use Turnitin within D2L Brightspace.